Welcome to Karen's Conversations number 28. I have the pleasure today to be talking to an esteemed colleague and good friend, James Gander, and we're going to be talking about the world of DevOps, or as I'd like to say it, what's happened to the dead cat. So we'll be having a good chat about that. But before we get into that, I'm going to throw straight to James and get James to introduce yourself. Hi.
Hi there. Thank you very much for that. Makes it sound like I almost know what I'm talking about. So I'm an IT management consultant, and I do mentoring and coaching for people, primarily focus in the IT operations area, focusing on improvements. Sorry, I've got hair in my eye. Around the people and process side of things, and that has led into how the DevOps principles can help those teams as well.
Absolutely. So I was having a look around, and you wrote a post, I think it was about April last year, or this year you wrote a post, and you said, you admitted in that 12 months prior to writing that, you couldn't have seen how DevOps would affect the types of organizations that you primarily work in. And as you mentioned, James, that's mainly the operations side of things. So what was it that changed your opinion?
It was several things, really. I did an ITSM crowd with Claire and Rob England, where I was still unsure whether DevOps was really something I should be concerned about or interested in, because I don't do dev. And talking to Rob on that, and then doing a lot of reading of things, so books like The Goal, where I got an understanding about Lean, then the Phoenix Project, which gave me sweaty palms as an IT operations manager. And then revisiting that a few months later, so it sank in a bit more. And then going out to DevOps Enterprise Summit in San Francisco last year, listening to people, hearing, it really was a very small minority of people there who considered the operations side of things. It was a lot of people in branded T-shirts who haven't seen the light of day for very long. But listening to them, talking to people there, reading up on articles, and getting some training, so doing things like the DevOps Foundation, Agile Service Management, it finally all started gelling in my head, and I could see what people were talking about and how it affected more than just the big enterprises doing development or the startups doing development. And I also got to understand that DevOps is more than just a tool. So a lot of people go, oh yeah, we're going to do DevOps, we need this, we need that to be able to automate. And really, I just understood it's all about people and getting them to think differently, no matter what team you're in. And it just clicked one day, and I thought, oh, I like this.
It's a bit like the revelation that Rob had as well. It's sort of like the penny dropped. It was like, oh, this isn't actually anarchy and chaos. It's actually something about it. Interesting what you said about
Rob going on to me about how I need to get into it, because it's going to be a game changer. I think if I'd been left to my own devices, it would have probably just passed me by.
Fair enough. Interesting what you said about the conference, James, and the makeup. So in terms of DevOps as a movement, do you see that primarily being driven by dev as opposed to ops at the moment?
I think, well, I mean, a lot of it started from a name perspective from Patrick Dubois. He came up with the title of DevOps, even though people have been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years, or mainframe time anyway. It feels like hundreds of thousands of years ago now. But when you look, you've got Gene Kim right at the front of driving the awareness of DevOps. And he's from an ITSM background. So it feels like dev is driving it, but I know at the core of it, there is some service management calcium in there making the bones. But we only ever really hear from those developers who are trying to do the CI/CD, automate this, automate that aspect. The operations people, as always, are just there getting on with it.
Yeah, trying to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
So what does it mean from an operational point of view then? What does it mean for these, like, you know, where does the dead cat go now? You know?
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of a dead cat, but I think a live cat being thrown over the fence is even more terrifying.
That's true.
Scratchy. At its core, I think, from an operations perspective, it's understanding the flow of work. So where does the work get initiated from? Is it from the business? Is it from another part of IT? Is it from within operations, trying to clear out some technical debt? But, you know, where is it starting? And then where does it have to go before it's finally finished? So being able to visualize that and understand who you're receiving stuff from and who you're passing it on to gives clearer understanding of what's going on. And then using that to help with the feedback side of things, whether that's to a development team if you've got one in-house or you've outsourced it, whether it's to project teams, so passing on your non-functional requirements, as they used to be called, whether it's going to the solutions architects or whoever, it's giving that feedback so that the cycle can be improved upon. And letting them all know what operations are requiring to be built into the systems. So, you know, I said non-functional requirements, but also if something keeps failing in a new release of an application, or a project has just finished and something keeps failing, being able to feed that back to the starting point to say, okay, your next release, can you make sure this is included in the backlog, because it's creating a lot more incidents for us? Or, you know, we've got 2 problem records here, can you incorporate those into your architecture? And then getting that experimental aspect sorted out as well. So within DevOps, you've got the 3 ways. So the first way is having the identified flow of work from left to right. Then you've got the feedback where right is feeding back to left. But then eventually you've got the continual experimentation and learning. So getting ops to think, if this is happening, why don't we try doing that? Why don't we try scripting all these jobs that are taking us 3 hours a week to do? Why don't we try that? And then being confident enough to learn that if something fails, well, okay, don't do it again. Go back to the old way, work out what happened, learn from it, and then try it again. But to be able to get them to do that, we've got to get CIOs to think differently and get away from the blame culture. So there's a huge amount that we can do using DevOps in operations. But it's, as I said before, it's the whole cultural thing. It's changing people, and not just the doers, but the senior people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, with my organizational change hat on, you know, it's like you say, it's a mindset shift. And it's a big mindset shift, and it has to happen across the organization. So what have you seen some sort of organizations trying to, you know, especially in IT, we go, oh, DevOps or Agile or Lean, you shiny thing, let's do it, and sort of drop it in without taking consideration of the shift that people are going to have to make. And like you say, that's a big shift to say, I am now allowed to experiment. I'm allowed to fail as long as I learn from it. for a lot of organizations, that's a big change. So how have you seen some organizations grapple with that side of things?
It's normally the hardest area to get that change happening is at the CIO level. If you've got CIOs who've grown up into that role in the last 10 years, excuse me, generally they're the ones who are finding it the hardest to allow people to fail and not moan about it, to be able to go back to the wider business and say, yep, we tried something, it didn't work, this is what we're doing to fix it. And getting them to get the wider business involved in IT, so the prioritization of work, because that's something else that we've got to get people doing within DevOps. It's not just IT in isolation. You've got to get your business sponsors, those who are driving the value or seeing the value, to be heavily involved in the prioritization of work. So, you know, a good example is they want this project delivering, they need it doing within whatever time period, whether that's agile sprints or waterfall 3 months later, 6 months later. And then there's a major incident that needs the same people who are working on the project. IT will automatically go, oh, well, we'll prioritize the incident over the project. But is that the right thing to do? Business don't like to be involved in making those decisions because it puts the pressure on them. The focus is on them. They like to be able to moan about IT to getting it wrong afterwards. Sweeping generalization statement there.
But, absolutely true.
Maybe. But that's another area that we've got to get focused. So the people on the ground tend to be the ones who are most keen to do it. The people higher up the chain are the ones who are struggling the most with adapting it or adopting it. But the people on the ground will go, oh, shiny, let's try Kanban. And it'll start off and then stop because some of the post-it notes fell off, or they want to use an an online Kanban board, and then people forget to go to it. Or they focus on automating something through scripting more than something that maybe is a high priority because it's shiny and we can get in there and do things. So it leads itself to failure in a few different ways, but not in the same ways in the same places. And you probably see that with a lot of organizational change things that you do. It's you expect it to be, this is what will be the issue, and actually it's something over here for a completely different set of people that maybe gives you a smack around the back of the head when you weren't expecting it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Never make assumptions, hey?
No.
So, yeah, it's a big mindset like it is for a lot of the new, well, we're saying new shiny stuff, like you say, DevOps isn't anything particularly new as opposed to nor is Agile and Lean. They've been around for a long time, but it seems that a lot of organizations are going, oh, we've got to get on this bandwagon now. You mentioned in your post about DevOps using goals of CALMS, C-A-L-M-S. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, excuse me. A lot of the training for DevOps talks about the 3 ways and getting that right. But the area that stands out for me more is that CALMS. So you've got C of getting the culture right. And as we discussed, it's getting people to think differently, getting them to think of themselves as being part of an entity that is delivering something, whether it's a service or a product or whatever it might be, to a customer. Not just, oh, well, we're just the team sitting in the corner of IT. That's nothing to do with us. Everybody is delivering the same thing. Then you've got A for automation. Sounds like I'm reading the alphabet off now, but and with the development side of things, you know, that is a big part of it. So you can get the delivery of software out quicker and in time frames that the business wants, rather than when you think you can get it done by. But within the operations side, it's just as important. So as I mentioned before, if you can script those repetitive tasks that you're doing, you're removing the waste that is in place and enabling the team to deliver more value by actually having intelligent brains doing something intelligent, rather than checking that something's run or running a report that somebody needs who may or may not actually read it anyway. Then you've got the L, which is again the lean principle. So identifying where you've got waste, removing constraints, all those things that people have been trying to do for a long time without realizing that it's lean. Measuring, so know how you're performing, get yourself a baseline, measure it, and then as you try things, keep measuring it so that you know that what you're doing is actually adding value. Because if you spend some time doing something and it adds no value, then you shouldn't be doing it. But likewise, if you do something and it adds a lot of value, but it doesn't quite work, well, you can learn from that and then go back and retweak it until you get the value that you're aiming for, and you can keep you measuring against that to identify where you got further improvements, and is what you're doing really working. And then the S is sharing, something that a lot of people in IT, especially on the operations side, aren't renowned for. There is still a good core of heroes out there who like to hold information in their head because they're worried it's going to make them lose their job. But getting that as part of the culture put in place so that people are sharing knowledge, they're sharing the workload. So if you can shift something left so that somebody further down the line can do it, then you don't have to do it. The product or the service can be delivered quicker, more effectively, lesser cost maybe. Then it all starts coming into that, as Rob England would call it, hippie phase of everything's wonderful and everybody's great.
Dear, yes, the perfect world, nirvana.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Yeah, and that's, like you say, another big mind shift in terms of, we're talking about, knowledge workers now and sharing information, but for a lot of people that's uncomfortable if they feel that sharing that information will do them out of a job at the end of the day. So yeah, we need to demonstrate that that's not the case, I guess, and do a case in point for people. Would you say that DevOps is for every organization?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's like everything that you do, you've got to make it fit. And the good thing about DevOps is nobody's written books about it to say this is how you do it. Because as soon as that happens, everybody goes, oh, well, I've got to follow this to the letter. Even though the first paragraph might be adopt and adapt.
Go figure.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter whether you're a two-person IT shop, which is taking on board the ideas of visualizing your work so you can prioritize it better, you can see where it's coming from, where it's going, reducing waste in what you're doing, automating whatever you can do that makes sense to do, sharing knowledge between yourselves and maybe with your customers, or a 200-year-old huge behemoth of an organization with several hundred people in an internal IT department. They can get a lot out of it because they can learn to work with the business for the prioritization. They can understand what the flow of the work is so that they can, again, do the feedback. There's very little that you can't do in any size organization from what I've seen. I'm happy for somebody to point out to me that I'm talking twaddle, because I'm always willing to learn. But from what I see, yeah. And you don't have to be that ideal unicorn startup in Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
Of England
absolutely.
implementing it. No, that's a bad phrase. Helping ministries in Wellington to go down the DevOps route. And you wouldn't have thought governmental ministries would be in any position to do this, because things have got to be done in certain ways, but they're adopting it really quickly now. It's good to see.
Excellent. That's good. So what would you say some of the early benefits, it's if an organization is trying to do DevOps, and it might be that it's being driven from the middle or from the bottom, and it needs to demonstrate get some wins on the board to convince the CIO or whoever that it's the way to go. What would be some of the early benefits that organizations could look for?
Excuse me. I think
quick wins, I guess.
Yeah. So visualizing your work. So not just the teams being able to see, oh, I've got 30 calls in my queue, and nobody really knowing which ones you're working on and which ones are on hold, which ones are stalled. But using something like Kanban, where you can have your sticky notes on the wall and people can see, we've got 50 items here that need to be addressed, and we're only allowing people to handle 3 at any one time, to limit that work in progress so they can focus on it and get it through quicker. Because then managers can walk up and see what's going on, rather than it all being hidden in a little portal. Then being able to, again, understand the flow of work, but where does it come from? It just appears in your service management tool, or a project manager walks up to you and says, oh, I've been told you're the person to help me on this project. And you've got no idea who really asked for it, why they asked for it. You just got to build a server and whatever. So, but being able to visualize that, understand where it's coming from, where it's going to, who is going to be involved in it. And then I think the biggest win is getting your stakeholders, customers, whatever you call them, heavily involved in the prioritization of the work. So rather than the head of finance, the head of HR, the head of whatever fleet, saying, IT, we need these projects doing, and you've got a dozen different projects, or in one organization I saw 120 all sitting there. 60 of them are high priority and the rest are all not quite high priority, but still need doing. Getting the business involved in prioritizing those, so you can say, well, we can only do this number. Which ones are more important? Gives IT that sense of, we can do that because you're telling us which ones are your priorities, and you're arguing amongst yourselves which ones are the priority for the organization, not just pet projects. So having that ability, I think, are the early benefits of it, because it starts giving you a little bit more control.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bit that comfort that IT, that they're doing the right things right, and not just who shouts loudest. And I agree with what you said about, Kanban. It's so simple, and yet it's so powerful that, the business or the CIO, the CEO can walk past and go, I know exactly what's being worked on, what's being delivered, and what's coming, based on what we know as our current priorities, and not, a 50-page report that no one's ever going to need. And when the CEO gets tapped on the shoulder and say, what are your guys working on, or guys and girls working on? It's like, well, come here and I'll show you. There you go. It's not like, oh, let me go and ask so-and-so to run a report and I'll tell you what projects we've got going and whatever. And I suppose a lot of that is having the Kanban of Kanban boards, but it's all doable.
Unless you're in a home office like mine, where I'm in a rental property and the house has got wallpaper on it that won't take sticky notes, so I can't do it.
And I still haven't found sticky notes that stick well. The ones behind me
Yes.
drop off every so often. I'm sitting here working away and I suddenly hear a I'll go, there's something's gone, something's gone.
Was that work in progress or was that on hold?
Exactly. It's now done. An excuse to move it.
Definition of done is
definition of done. Yeah, that's right. We've talked about some of the challenges, and we probably covered it. What would you say the biggest challenge, or what's about? No, let's not say challenges. We talked about it. What's the biggest mistake organisations make when they go, "Oh, we need to do DevOps"?
I would say it's probably the same as if they decide they want to utilise any other way of working. Trying to do too much too quickly, too soon. So somebody will roll into the office one day and say, we need to do DevOps. I've read the book, so what we need to do is da-da-da-da-da-da. Let's have all that done by the end of the month, and then we're doing it. So it's working out what the priorities are, identifying the issues that you've got, and addressing those in manageable chunks, not trunks, because that's different. HR gets involved if you walk into the office in your trunks.
Quite rightly.
Yeah. And then I suppose assuming that it's going to be prescriptive and you have to adopt it wholly, that will lead to failure. You're changing the way that people are thinking and working. And I know I'm teaching you to suck eggs here, but that can't be rushed.
Yep.
So picking the quick wins. So it might just be, well, let's visualize our work by sticking it up on the wall, or let's create a value stream map so we can understand for this piece of work what the flow is through the business, where the constraints are, and start eliminating some of those. Or it could just be, let's get the senior business leaders into weekly meetings or fortnightly meetings to help prioritize the work with us.
Yep.
Just little tiny bits and get people used to that, and then move on to the next one.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you and I, live and breathe this stuff, and, we recognize the people side of things that organizations, often still overlook. I'm working in an organization now that's, saying we're doing agile with a little a. So it's like, okay, that sounds like a, because
Yeah.
we're not quite sure,
it just means we don't document it.
Correct. We'll have a go, but not considering the impact that it has. Someone has that, okay, agile, it's been proved, it works, especially when the world we live in now, where change is constant and volatile and uncertain and all that sort of stuff, that incremental iterative change is probably the way to go. So no one's sort of arguing with that. But then it's not just about, like you say, let's just do it. Let's do agile this week, or let's do DevOps this week. It's thinking about, like you say, the priorities for the organization and how can we, bite the elephant and eat the elephant one chunk at a time, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Start with the trunk, probably.
Start with the clean end.
That's right. So we've talked about some of the other frameworks. So we've touched on Lean. I've just mentioned Agile. So how does DevOps fit with things like the ITIL approach, COBIT, Lean, and all those sort of things?
Yeah. So it's been interesting with the ITIL side of things, because when DevOps first started to become flavour of the month, there was a huge pushback saying, oh, ITIL and DevOps won't work. And then people started proving that they could work together and they were actually good to work together. And I think that's becoming more and more apparent now. There are certain things that ITIL does that if you are sensible and take it to fit what you want, it works really well with DevOps. So, having some kind of change management doesn't necessarily have to be a whole big cab where everybody reviews every single change, but having a place where changes are recorded, but it's all defined. So if you meet these test criteria, then it's just a pre-approved change and we don't need to be involved, through to this is a high risk, it all needs to be agreed, product owners, head of development, head of operations, blah, blah, and then it's approved. You can make it fit. Same with incident management and problem management, where it can feed back into the backlog for the next round of improvements. You've just got to use ITIL as it was originally designed to be used, which is adopt and adapt. We've all got a flat bit on our head there where we keep saying it and never goes in.
We all got the tattoo, adopt and adapt.
Maybe that's what I should have for my 50th.
Yes. You'd have adopt on one fist and adapt on the other one.
Nevertheless, he adapted.
Yes.
Lean IT. I mean, lean is core to what DevOps is. We've talked about that. Identifying the flow, identifying the constraints, blah, 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 blah. COBIT, I think it's a good fit in there from the governance aspect, but again, it's got to be tweaked to fit what the organization is doing. So you don't necessarily want heavy governance, but what you do want is the governance to be stipulated and then shifted left, or that way for you, I think, so that people know what has to be put in place and it's just done. And then that's managed through the management of the COBIT, governance management, blah, blah. So there's no reason why that can't fit. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, but why wouldn't it? KCS as well. I mean, that's a great integrator with DevOps. It's all about the flow of knowledge. And then there's the new kid on the block, Verisum, which when I get my hands on the book, hopefully I can understand a bit more about that. But
next
that
month
looks like it's a good shoe-in. Yep, that's on my list for Santa. And because DevOps isn't a defined framework, it's just a set of guiding principles that will probably change on a regular basis as people use it more and they go, oh, actually, that doesn't make so much sense now. Or we've forgotten this one, we need to include that in there. It can be whatever you want it to be. So if you find that the DevOps principles don't integrate with your other frameworks that you're using, then I'd suggest you're doing it wrong.
I would concur, absolutely. Now, you at Gander Service Management, you have a simulation that you offer to people called the Phoenix Project. So tell us a bit about that.
That is really exciting. I don't normally like these gamification type things, but this one really excites me. It's done by Gaming Works. So Jan and Paul from Gaming Works up in the Netherlands, they devised it. It's their baby. I just train it and run it. But it's based on the book that Gene Kim, Jez Humble, and John Willis, somebody else who I can't remember. So if they're watching, apologies. They wrote, a lot of people have probably read it, but set in a company that produces parts for cars, going down the pan. Phoenix Project is a program of work built up to turn it around. New IT operations manager or VP of IT operations is brought in. His sole purpose is to make sure the project gets delivered, because of course it's all down to IT. And on his journey to get this delivered, just like every IT operations manager has in their life, things start going wrong. And he's got a mentor, which I'd recommend everybody has a mentor, by the way. and some of the concepts from lean manufacturing, and they go through and use all the concepts or the principles that DevOps is putting out there as a way to, and I'm not going to spoil it, but as a way to get through to the end. So the game is based very heavily on that. Everybody has a role from the book, ideally for 11 people. And you run 4 rounds. The first round, complete chaos, because people are told, here's a project that needs to be delivered. And as they're preparing for it and planning it, as the CEO, you come along and say, oh, I need this fixing. So you've got people not working together. There's chaos. They just about muddle through. You introduce some of the ways of working from DevOps to them. Next round, and you score them on it so they can see the progress they're making. The next round, a little bit more pressure on them. They identify some constraints, hopefully. You take them through some more of the principles. And you can see that as you're going through round on round, and the retrospective in between each one lets them think about different things. You don't teach them things, but you show them, you lead them to think about it themselves. The third round, the pressure's really on. But by that point, they can handle almost anything because of what they've learned. And then the fourth round, it's finishing it off. But it's great because where I've run it so far, you've got people going back to work. They haven't spent 3 days listening to somebody doing PowerPoint teaching. They're learning it in a safe and fun environment. They're not doing their normal role in the game. They're doing something different to what they'd normally do. And they go back to work and they can actually use it. They may not be experts in using Kanban or value stream mapping or whatever it might be, but they've got the idea of it. They can try it. They can use it. And I was talking to an operations manager a couple of weeks ago for an organization I ran it for. And he said they were having a planning session for pushing out a whole load of patches for one of the recent virus hacking type thingies that was out there. And they're a managed service provider, so they were planning it all out for their customers. And it was getting a little bit chaotic. And one of the guys said, yeah, but when we did the Phoenix project, we would have got the business involved by this point for them to prioritize for us. So why aren't we getting all of our customers in here to talk through it now? And the operations manager just went, that wouldn't have happened a week ago.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
So it's little tiny things. People actually, it sinks in because they've been playing it.
Yeah, and you're right. It's like that experiential learning. It can really help shift that mindset because they actually see it in, like you say, a safe and fun environment, and they actually see it working. And can go back and apply, maybe not all of it, as you say, but little bits and pieces as they go, and do some baby steps and get some runs on the board.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the good thing about the game as well, or the workshop, is it's not just for your IT people. You can have your project managers, your service delivery managers, your business representatives, anyone and everyone who works with IT can be doing it because they get visibility of how things need to be done. So it's a good way of breaking down those barriers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. So where could people go to find more information if they want to find out about the Phoenix project simulation?
Well, a good place to start is my website, which is www.gander.co.nz. Or just get in touch and we can have a chat. And I'm looking at partnering with an organisation in Australia who will be able to sell it for me as well.
Absolutely. That's great. So we'll put I'll put a link to your website in the notes as well when we post this.
Cool.
So that's been a great conversation, James. I'm really happy we've been able to have that chat. You know, like I said, DevOps has been around a while, but I think there's still not necessarily all that understanding of, you know, that we can do it in little pieces and just pull out what suits us, adopt and adapt, as you say, and get some advantages and benefits out of it. Thanks so much. Sorry?
You don't have to be doing dev to do DevOps.
Correct, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, James. I'm sure we'll talk again very soon.
Sure we will. Thank you very much.